for. Let's bring in Philipp Ivanov, founder, GRASP, which is Geopolitical Risks and Strategy Practice. We also have Andy Rothman, founder, Sinology, LLC. Gentlemen, good to have both of you here. Thank you very much for joining us. Philipp, if I can start with you with regards to what you've seen over the weekend as far as India and Pakistan is concerned. You heard our reporter sort of give us an update in terms of what next from here. What is your sense, Philipp, as a geopolitical analyst?
Well, I think, as you said, it's very positive signs that both sides, India and Pakistan, are trying to de-escalate the tensions. But of course, I think it's a long way to go. But I think the news from India, Pakistan, on the Indian-Pakistan conflict are very, very positive. It's not so positive on other issues. I think Ukraine and Russia are very far from any agreement or even a ceasefire. And I think that we're going to discuss the US-China shortly as well.
Philipp, hi, good morning. So great to have you on the show today. So how should we sort of read this? There was this increasing risk being associated with obviously the Indian market as well, given the events of the last couple of days. But now that the two sides are talking, from the market perspective, would you reckon that the worst is over?
I think that perhaps the most intense phase of the conflict is hopefully behind us. And so the market's reacting to that, to those news. But I think, just like with the tariffs and with the US-China competition, I think sometimes markets react prematurely. So I would be quite cautious on all these three geopolitical issues and hot spots that you mentioned. I think it's too early to say whether we see a real progress or it's just a pause in fighting or competition or confrontation.
Got that. Philipp, coming back to you. Let's get in Andy Rothman as well into the discussion. Hi, Andy. Good morning. Thanks a lot for joining in. Andy, what do you make of President Trump's role in this entire conflict? Is he in our camp, that's India's camp, or not? Because there was a lot of flip-flop that we saw over the weekend.
I have no idea how Trump is thinking about this, to be honest. My weekend has been entirely focused on thinking about US-China and the tariff conflict.
Right. Andy, so talk about US and China. What did you make of that statement? I mean, is it a bit of a surprise, right? I mean, on the website, say a deal has been announced after 2 days of, for the first time, 2-day talks. This is classic Trump, or should we even expect a framework deal? No one expecting an actual trade deal, but even a framework after 2 days of talks?
I think classic Trump is a good way to describe what we've seen over the weekend. Go back a few days to last week when the US and the UK announced a grand trade deal with a lot of fanfare in the White House. But when the details were released, there was actually no deal there. There was just a framework for future negotiations. In fact, the short paper that the two governments signed said at the very end, both parties acknowledge that there is no legal basis for this agreement. So I think with China, we had a couple of positive things over the weekend. One is that the two sides met at a senior level because there hasn't been high-level contact between Washington and Beijing since Trump took office. So that's great that they started talking. And even better was that both sides came away from the conversation seemingly pretty happy with the conversation. But in terms of do we have a deal, the White House press release that you referred to earlier, the headline says trade deal with China, but Bessent is quoted in there as not using the word deal, but saying that we've had a good conversation that lays the foundation for future talks. So kind of like what they talked about with the UK. We're going to have to wait another 12, 24 hours to find out whether there's any substance to this at all. So could have been worse, but hard to say if this is really a turning point.
Andy, but what do you make of, Trump's relationship with India? Because we were expecting maybe we'll be one of the first few to get a deal done. It appears China jumped the line so far, which is good for global growth, because it puts those recessionary fears a little bit behind. But what about India? Where are we placed in Trump's agenda?
Well, President Trump is, with good reason, really obsessed with the China part of the trade relationship because it is one of the three largest trading partners after Mexico and Canada. So that it's understandable why he's more focused on that. Also, my assumption is that one of the reasons we're seeing more action on the China side pretty abruptly is that maybe President Trump is starting to feel a little bit nervous about the looming impact on inflation for American consumers, on the possibility that store shelves might be a little bit bare in the coming months as cargo flows from China slow down, and also that he's likely to see more layoffs in the United States, because remember that a lot of the imports from China that come into the United States are intermediate goods. And so companies in the US are already starting to lay off workers because they either can't get access to components that come from China, or those components are just too expensive for it to make it worthwhile. And then, of course, is he starting to worry that certain things that are critical, for example, to the US military, like gallium, might not be available. Also, something critical to basic industrial processes, especially for EVs.
Philip, just to come back, the thing is that obviously the engagement between India and the US is at two very clear levels right now. There's the geopolitical level, and then there's the trade deal, which we've been trying to thrash out for the last many, many weeks. How do you think this balance is going to play out? Because on the Indian side, I can tell you that a lot of people are not too happy with the way the optics were around the announcement of the ceasefire and the kind of statements and tweets that we kept getting through the weekend. The Indian side has categorically rejected any international mediation. It says that the ceasefire was something between India and Pakistan. The Pakistani side approached India. But the narrative being spun by the US was very different, and it's not being too appreciated by several quarters here. Does that put any roadblocks potentially ahead for the US-India trade deal?
I think that President Trump, as Andy pointed out, is very focused on, first of all, the US-China trade deal, and then second on Russia-Ukraine negotiations. I mean, these are the issues that he was campaigning on during the elections. These are the issues that he constantly comments on. And these are the issues that he's sort of mobilizing his resources, his team to focus on. So, from my point of view, I think the U.S. involvement and U.S. influence on the trajectory of the India-Pakistan conflict, I think will be quite limited. But what it might mean, of course, is that the trade deal with India may not be on the priority list for the president. As a result, we'll see some delays in getting some kind of agreement. So that's where I think the danger is, just because the sheer volume and the sheer complexity of any agreement with China, as well as negotiating in between Ukraine and Russia, will take most of the bandwidth or foreign policy bandwidth of this administration. So I wouldn't be surprised if India will not be on the administration's radar for the next few weeks and even months.
Got that. Gentlemen, we'll leave it there for now. Good conversation. Philip and Andy, we'll touch base once again over the coming days, because this is evolving, ongoing situation. And I think what both Philip and Andy are saying is that on all three fronts that we spoke about, I mean, can you really say it is a big turning point? I mean, I think we'll have to just wait and see, especially with regards to US and China. It was classic Trump: announce something big and then sort of work backwards and try and put in details, fill in details as it comes along. Or in millennial lingo, they say, fake it till you make it.